Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Leap. Leap 24. I'm sure you all are having the excitement from this great energy, and fittingly so, I'm so honored and happy to be with you, Shelli, to learn from you and to get some insights of this great industry that is now increasingly becoming one of the most important when it comes to our lives on a daily basis. So thank you for making it. Was your, flight easy? Everything is good?
Everything's good. Eventually we'll have point-to-point transport with space technology, so we'll be able to get here a lot faster. But until then, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear. So for those of us who wants to have the Space 101 excitement about how this industry is important today and what's happening, what can you tell us?
Well, I think how many are investors in the room or entrepreneurs that are interested? A few hands about space technology. So let's start with the numbers, because these are business people and they want to know what's in it for them. So the global space economy last year in 2022 was $546 billion. By 2050, it's projected to grow to $1 to $3 trillion. Now, last year, of that $546 billion, 78% is commercial, which means it's products and services you're using every day. And let me give you a few more numbers. When we think back to the Apollo program 60 years ago, for every $1 that NASA invested, it was a $7 return. In 2014, for every dollar NASA invests in space technology, it's a $40 return. And everyone in this room, on average, you are connecting to a satellite 45 times a day. So space is part of your everyday life, whether you realize it or not. It is the infrastructure that is making all of this technology, like AI, possible.
Amazing. A simple question might rise up. Usually when we think of space investment, we think of governments. We think that this is an industry that only governments and big sovereign funds could afford. How could this be relevant to the, let's say, regular investor, if you will?
Well, again, let's think about that technology. So 60 years ago, during the Apollo era, we were focused on putting a man on the moon and safely returning him to Earth. And when we look at all the technology that has come from that, fire retardant clothing, telecommunications, formulated food, that was just from a one focused mission from two countries that were in a space race. Now, space is open for all. So yes, there is a place for governments, and governments are fantastic when we're looking at transitioning off of the government. So look at rockets. 20 years ago, to be in the rocket business, you worked for a government. They were run through the government. Now, thanks to technology and legislation, now you're seeing companies all over the world spring up like SpaceX and Blue Origin and others. And NASA is now doing public-private partnerships to pivot away from the government running the International Space Station. It will decommission the ISS in 2030, and it is awarding contracts to private companies to replace it. So these are how governments start out with high-risk exploration and inspiration, and then as time goes on and the economy matures, they transition it to commercial. So you are seeing the starting of the transition to low Earth orbit and cislunar orbit, which is between the Earth and the Moon, becoming a great opportunity for commercial to take over.
Wonderful. I mean, space, among other deep techs, are not the most favorable investment vehicles for VCs. But we're seeing them softening up for that. They're changing. The mind set is changing. How can we convince them to do that? How can the return on investment? You mentioned $1 for $4 are now $7.40 now. How can we excitement on the speed of the exploration?
So when we think about the cutting-edge technologies of today, artificial intelligence, VR, healthcare, energy and energy solutions, those are intersected with space technology. So space technology can be the infrastructure or the catalyst for that technology. So for those of you who are investors or entrepreneurs, a great place for you to go look at this cutting-edge technology with rapid applicability is the NASA Tech Transfer Office. There are thousands of patents that NASA and other governments like the European Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency, and others have created with agriculture, telecommunications, healthcare, that are waiting for investors and entrepreneurs just like you to commercialize.
That's amazing. And you touched upon what happened 60 years ago, where there were maybe only two nations trying to compete for the space. But today, other governments and other, entities are doing that as well. Talk to me about the competitive landscape, because, say I'm doing a innovative costume for astronauts, for example, and how much the market can contain when it comes to competition? How competitive or saturated or even unsaturated the market is when it comes to space innovations, if you will?
So I think what we've talked about so far is the part about space for space, cislunar economy, but let's pivot that now to space for Earth and how space is benefiting us on Earth. You talked about clothing. As a great example, I'm wearing my fashionista outfit today, and I know some innovators who are in space fashion. So I'm doing this in honor of her today.
Does that exist, space fashion?
It does,
Oh,
it
wow.
does. There are several space fashion designers, because what we need is, think about those, how many of you have seen those spacesuits they are still wearing from the Apollo era? That's not what we're going to go on to Mars with. That's not it. When you think of Blue Origin and SpaceX, some of them have contracted with companies like Under Armour and other companies. And so think about it. When you create that space technology from maybe MIT or an amazing university here, you're now going to overlay it with a company that does fashion, like Under Armour or someone else. You're going to be able to showcase your clothing line and then pivot it and market it here on Earth. So when you think about space, really, your market is here on Earth. Think about healthcare applications.
Yeah.
Many people are not aware that the Hubble Space Telescope, which looked into space for anomalies, was used by a company to look into the human body for anomalies, and they developed mammogram detection. That is saving millions of lives now on the planet. So when you think about healthcare applications, you're going to be able to exponentially grow those thanks to space technology.
Wonderful. And I think if I want to ask you, moving forward, are we seeing the tip of the iceberg, or are we there yet, or do you think that the next decade is going to contain much more when it comes to the interest in space as an industry?
So I think there's a lot of interest now, but it is kind of a niche community. And so one of the reasons I'm so honored to join you and LEAP this year is to help bridge from the space community to investors and entrepreneurs, saying there's room for everyone. We talked about the Apollo era. When we think about the Apollo era, 2 countries in a space race, STEM professionals, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, primarily male. Now when we think about the space industry, more than 90 nations are operating in space, and many more want to. We're looking at a diversity of skill sets. So we still need STEM professionals, but we need artists, innovators, technicians, program managers, policymakers. So it's very open to everyone, and now it's open to all genders and age groups. So now there is a direct access for all to come into the space industry in the area they're interested in.
And just this morning in the main stage during the opening, His Excellency, the Minister of Communication, honored Rayana Bernawi, our first Arab Muslim female astronaut ever. Yes. So it's an amazing accomplishment. Let me go to the cultural part, because this is very important. How can we, all of us dreamed at one stage that we want to become astronauts, right? And 99.9% ended up not becoming that. But maybe in the future, with everything that's happening on space exploration and tourism, how can we entice the new generation to become more interested in space, A, as an industry, but B, also as a potential business?
So I have an interstellar guide to success, and I think we need to embrace that when we think about the next generation. And it's all about building awareness, access, and action. We need to build those awareness. That's part of being here today. And as you said, having astronauts demonstrate that there are opportunities. When we highlight diversity of astronauts and opportunities, we have to build the awareness that there's an opportunity for you in the space industry. Then we need to create access points. And access points can be education, both formal and informal, fellowships, internships. It can be mentoring. There are great mentoring programs to help bring people in. We need to build those networks. There are great networks for space. There's Women Tech Network, there's Space Generation Advisory Council, there's going to the International Astronautical Congress every year. So we need to build those networks. And another great way to create access points is through scholarships and awards. You know, when you award a young leader an opportunity to go to a conference, it creates national news. I mean, that is huge when someone from Malaysia gets a scholarship to go to the International Astronautical Congress this year in Milan. So, or to come to LEAP. Imagine the prestige that gives and then builds more awareness. So that's how we create access points. Now what it comes down to is action. We have to do it. If we're in industry, if we're leaders, we need to be out there talking. We need to be mentors. We need to be helping to create those access points. If you're a business leader, can you bring school groups through your plant, through your facility, so they can see what the opportunities. If you're building satellites, bring young professionals in, give those internships and awards. And the best thing you can give is your time, because that's how we're going to bring the next generation into the space industry.
Very, very well said, giving time. And to close the loop on the space ecosystem, I want to mention regulation. It's very important. Often, when space is being taken very seriously as an industry, look at it top down, so government or the country would look at it as a strategy. This happened here in Saudi Arabia with the Space Agency and CST, etc. Talk to me a little bit about regulation. I mean, generally worldwide, are we there yet when it comes to how regulated is the, obviously it's very regulated, but how important is regulation? What do we need to do to make, because always regulation is tied up to innovation, right? And there's like this interesting relationship. Sometimes it's inverse relationship, sometimes it's not. Talk to us about regulation and what needs to be done globally in order to make this.
So there's a number of policies that we need to think about, and I'm going to start with creating a space agency or a space program requires strategy, because it has to start with what's important to you and your citizens to create access and opportunity. Not everyone has to follow the model of the US or China or Russia, building launch vehicles, building launch rockets, creating that type of workforce. Instead, you can think about how will space benefit my country and my citizens. And then that's how you can create the strategy of what are the jobs you want to create, what is the training programs you need for your students, how do you reskill your current workforce, and then you go to the next level. So even internally, it starts with policy. I talked about launch vehicles. Up until 2004, launch vehicles were only designed and launched by governments. In 2004, the United States changed the laws to allow for commercial launch. That allowed and opened the door for SpaceX and commercial companies to now launch citizens into space. So as regulation, as policy leaders, you control the future of where your country is going, and then you get to help work with others. And now where do you work with others? Well, there are several great organizations. One is the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. They are working on how are we working together, because the laws and treaties that govern how we work here on the planet don't extend very far into space. And as we see more and more players coming into the space industry, as well as we have challenges like orbital debris, we have to work together, nations working with other nations to figure out how we'll solve some of those, but then how are we also going to coexist as we become an interplanetary species, as we create research centers on the moon and Mars and beyond.
Wonderful. I'm conscious of time, but I have a very important question to ask personally. If I would ask you to name the top maybe 3, maybe 5 subsectors within space that you are personally excited about, that you think innovators and startups and VCs can get into and have very good returns, and there's a big room for innovation, and why, please?
So again, I'm going to highlight that going to that NASA Tech Transfer Office site. So bring up your phones, Google NASA Tech Transfer site, because when you can look at the technology that's already there. Now, a lot of the technology that's currently being produced that is revenue generating is telecommunications. But I shared with you one that I'm super excited about is healthcare. I think as we look at healthcare, solving osteoporosis for women, they're doing a lot of great research in space. As we're looking at 3D printing organs, as we're looking at macular degeneration and solving blindness here on Earth, as we're looking at other ways of taking space technology to look at cancer research and solve it here on Earth, one, you're going to benefit humanity, but you're also going to generate revenue. The other big area is, why are we doing it when there's so many problems on Earth? So many people say, we have so many challenges here on Earth. But what I share with you is, again, if you go to that United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, every one of the Sustainable Development Goals has a space part to it. Food insecurity, water, energy, partnership, gender equality, quality education. There are space solutions for each and every one of those. So what's most important is, what are you all passionate about? How do you want to change the world? Because space can be part of your strategy.
Very well said. And with that high note, I would like to end. I personally learned a lot and enjoyed this very much. Shelli, thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge and information and passion for space. And I'm sure you're going to stick around for some unofficial Q&A later. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.
Thank you, and thank you.